Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Muriel Bowser. I am Mayor of the District of Columbia and a member of the D.C. New Columbia Statehood Commission. I'm joined by the chairman of the D.C. Council, who co-chairs the commission, and I am also joined by the other members of the Statehood Commission, United States Senator Paul Strauss, Senator Michael D. Brown, and Representative Owelewa. All right. And I am pleased to call this commission meeting to order. It is now 2:17, and we are located in the ceremonial room, the mayor's ceremonial room. I don't know what we call this room, actually. The ceremonial room in the John A. Wilson building. So with that, we have, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn to you momentarily for your remarks, but we have an agenda before us that includes review of the last meeting's minutes, a budget presentation by Senator Strauss, update by Senior Advisor Beverly Perry, and other commissioners' discussion, public comment, and adjournment. I simply want to add, and I, of course, provide, Ms. Perry will provide the meat of our comments. But this commission, along with our statehood delegation and the work of our statehood office, with advocacy groups that we help to support, along with our congresswoman's efforts, are meant to advance the district's march towards full autonomy and 2 voting senators and full voting representation in the House of Representatives. So with that, this meeting is meant to hear from the statehood delegation, approve the statehood delegation's budget as per statute, and hear from members of the public. So with that, I will turn to Chairman Mendelson.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser, and to my colleagues on the commission, the representatives and the 2 senators, as well as the public. Good afternoon. I usually don't have much in the way of remarks at these meetings, but I do want to say this. The idea behind the Statehood Commission, which is what we are meeting right now, is to bring more process to our advocacy for statehood for the District of Columbia. A number of years ago, the council adopted legislation, at this point I don't remember how many years ago, which tried to give the commission a bit more autonomy over its budget, but also at the same time take the 3 elected representatives and force that the head of the legislative branch and the head of the executive branch, in other words, me and the mayor, meet with the 3 as a group, the 5 of us, and that we meet publicly at least once a year, and that in this way we give a bit more structure to our attempts at advocacy for statehood for the District of Columbia. So this meeting is a little bit overdue because we're supposed to be adopting a budget, I think, for the current fiscal year, but this is an important opportunity for us to come together and to see what we're doing and what progress we have with regard to advancing statehood, as opposed to just what is often called the shadow delegation, just off on its own, the mayor off on her own, me off on my own, that there's some coordination. So I want to thank everybody for being here today, and with that, Madam Mayor, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we should all have the minutes from the last meeting of the Statehood Commission before us. Are there any questions, comments, corrections?
I move adoption.
There's been a motion to adopt. It's been seconded. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes have been approved unanimously. Further, there is a presentation I think that members received in advance of this meeting, and Senator Strauss will present on behalf of the delegation.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser. Co-Chairman Mendelson, in accordance with Section 2.3 of the Commission's bylaws, I have the privilege to present the delegation's Statehood Initiative's proposed spending plan for fiscal year 2024. Since this is our first in-person meeting of the Commission in some time, I'll provide an overview of the functions and activities, especially for any members of the public who are attending that may not be familiar with the Commission's functions and purpose. It was actually in 2014, Mr. Chairman, when the Council overhauled the legislation for the Statehood Commission and created this framework to facilitate the engaging of the Mayor and Chairperson directly with the elected members of the Statehood delegation. The Commission provides a forum to provide for unity of messaging and programming in support of D.C. Statehood initiatives. It also gives the heads of the executive and legislative branches a direct participatory role to play in statehood programming with an equal vote alongside the elected delegation members. We are actually here with an attempt to present the fiscal year 2024 spending plan based on the 2024 budget. We could certainly talk about 2023, which is in its last month. The current fiscal year 2024 budget under the jurisdiction of this commission is $266,833, consisting of $162,000 in the personnel services assigned to the Office of Statehood Delegation and $105,000 in non-personnel services to fund statehood initiatives subject to allocation by the New Columbia Statehood Commission. The current budget reflects a $19,000 increase overall from fiscal year 2023, specifically a net increase of $41,174, primarily in the New Columbia Statehood Commission program to align the budget for both travel and professional services. All of the revenue sources are from local appropriated or donated funds, consistent with the federal appropriation statute. No federal funds are allocated towards statehood initiatives. The highlights of our 2024 proposed spending plan include cuts in the budget for delegation to travel to targeted states as well as outreach to international organizations. Funding for the 51-star celebrity endorsement programs is proposed to be continued at levels already reduced from prior years. We propose to maintain funding for media programs, including Senator Brown's Internet radio show. The proposed spending plan adds 2 new statehood initiatives to the 2024 program. One is a request by U.S. Representative Owelewa to have the government fund a program that had been initiated and previously funded through his political committee. This is a supercar parade consisting of a rally and car show. I suspect he will be able to explain better its relationship to D.C. statehood. Additional line items in Object Class 20 reflect funding either equal to or in excess of his separate budgetary request for various supplies and equipment. Traditionally, the delegation, ever since we initiated the commission programming, the delegation has come to the commission with a unified spending plan signed by all 3 members, which is normally approved as a formality by the other members of the commission. I don't mean to paraphrase the poet Billy Joel when he said they started to fight when the money got tight and they just didn't count on the tears. But while we have done our best to accommodate all of the requests by Representative Owelewa in the budget, some of them have not been included in this particular spending plan before us today. In particular, requests to use certain government funds to take over the expenses previously funded by his political campaign committee were not included based on the requirements of Subtitle C of Section 35B1 of the New Columbia Statehood Initiatives and Omnibus Reform Amendment Act. An additional request was not included in the budget per se, but he can certainly present it, and that is the African Mission for Investment in Youth, which was also presented for commission consideration. If approved, this would be an amendment to the International Organizations Outreach Program. The representative had requested funding for 2 international trips, but guidance from OCFO's legal counsel office suggested that the character of these particular trips were sufficiently different from the goals outlined in the current spending plan that a formal commission amendment would be necessary. Finally, we are excited and anticipate significant programming and expenses for the upcoming national conventions. In 2016, you, Madam Mayor, joined us at both major conventions, and in particular, we had a very successful event with celebrities and delegates around them. We consider the 2024 convention cycle a very significant in our ability to raise awareness for statehood. Finally, let me address what the spending plan does not do. It does not provide funding to any one office holder or individual. It does not assign staff to specific holders or individuals. These issues are handled through the agency's acting executive director. But here's what it does do. It does fulfill the legal requirement under D.C. law that appropriated funds approved by the budget process be programmed subject to and authorization with an approved budget in accordance with Subtitle C, Section 32E2 of the New Columbia Statehood Initiative Omnibus Regulatory Reform Amendment Act of 2014. It allocates the entirety of the 2024 appropriation, and it conforms with all legal and regulatory requirements of the Act. I would move for discussion its adoption and invite any member to second.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor to adopt the budget as presented. Any discussion?
I second it.
I have a discussion. I would like to make a motion to accept the budget as long as the finances are divided amongst each statehood commissioner evenly.
Senator Strauss, will you speak to that question?
Yes. Prior to the 2014 Statehood Commission programming, donated funds were allocated equally amongst 3 funds. What the commission structure did is it changed that, and it made us subject to this commission process, which means that we are unified now into one legal entity with a unified office, staff, et cetera, and encouraged to fund specific initiatives to help advance statehood. And so things like targeted states, and let me thank you for your work, particularly in the state of West Virginia, where you went and spoke to members of the state legislature there, or where we go around the country and speak to voters. That's important work. Those type of programs are not specific to an individual member. One of the things that this law does is it forces us to work together on statehood initiatives, and it invites, or perhaps more accurately even requires, the full participation of the executive and legislative leadership to approve them. Particularly in these days of a hostile Republican Congress, and even with the risk that in years past, funding for statehood could potentially even be defunded through the Act of Federal Appropriations. The idea that we come before the public and each other and talk about the initiatives are basically the way the law envisions us to work. And for almost a decade now, as we get into 2024, that will be a decade of this particular structure. Individual ideas and initiatives are encouraged to be brought before us where we work together on them. Now, certainly individual members take leadership over some initiatives. Senator Brown's radio show is indeed Senator Brown's radio show. And I am excited to hear about the supercar rally. I'm a car enthusiast myself, and I think that as you said in your supporting documents, we need to get people's attention with better things other than speeches and the same old boring stuff. And so we were happy to grant that request, as we were in our meeting where we talked about the supplies and equipment you wanted. but the law requires us to all agree. So it is not one-third, one-third, one-third. It is a commonality of an appropriation, and I
So-
look forward to continuing to work together
May I
with you.
ask the representative which lines you were talking about dividing by three, or you were talking about the entire appropriation?
No, in terms like the FTEs, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the commission receives 3 FTEs, and each member, or I know that one senator has 1, and the remaining goes to the other senator. So I was wondering if Senior Senator Strauss would be interested in possibly having each member have their own full-time staffer to conduct the duties of the office.
Can I speak to that, Madam Chairman? First of all, there's only one problem here, is that we're grossly underfunded. It's ridiculous that a city that calls statehood a priority spends $20 billion and gives us $220,000 a year to pursue this. Now, I got to say I'm thankful for the money, because the first 9 years that I had my job, I paid for everything out of my own pocket, everything. When the council went on a trip to New Hampshire, all their expenses were paid. I bought the airline tickets for me and Senator Strauss. We got our own transportation. We went to New Orleans, did the same thing, paid for our hotels, paid for our airfare. It was ridiculous. It was costing me a lot of money every year, so I'm thankful for the money. But it's ridiculous that we get $220,000. The taxpayers have given us enough money that we have a fund with $360,000 in it right now that this commission doles out. Senator Strauss and I get and I think Representative Olalawa get $7,000 each from that fund. And this is, and first of all, that's wrong. And second of all, it's misleading to the taxpayers who donate money to that fund. And that's the problem we have here. Should Representative Olalawa have his own full-time staff person? Absolutely. Senator Strauss has one, and I have one. Now, they work together, both Angelie and Karen Zolgit, who, by the way, should be recognized for their hard work. If the representative needs something, they certainly would provide it. But they really work for me and Paul. And the representative doesn't have a full-time staffer, and that's wrong. And the only reason that is because we don't have enough money. We shouldn't have to take money out of the pittance that we pay the 2 staffers that we have now, one of whom gets no benefits. You know, this is ridiculous. We're the only people in Washington, D.C., the only elected officials that are formed into a commission, and we are the lowest funded agency in a district government. This is a priority? Come on.
I'd like to reclaim a little bit of time.
If I could just respond to the question, because with all due respect to my colleague, your presentation wasn't quite in conformance with the legal realities. We have an executive director, Angelie Sema, who, first of all, in terms of dealing with all the requirements of being a government agency, certainly doesn't work for me in an individual capacity. Let me just say that all of us in the delegation would love to have the kind of budgets that council members get, where they get personal staff, there's committee staff. We would like to be paid ourselves if that was possible. That is not where we are. We are funded as a paper government agency with a unitary staff. I want to commend Ms. Silgut, for example, who has been able to attend all 4 of the adverse House hearings. And I understand and why you couldn't have been at them personally, but she has been representing all of us down there. They work together. Yes, she does work for the radio show, but there is no such thing as individual staff or individual members. And you could certainly talk to the executive director about personnel issues. And let me just say that we're also transitioning for any of the government employees to full benefits, so that we can do that, but that takes a little bit out of the budget. So the current structure doesn't provide for individual folks. It would be a you're mischaracterizing the legal relationship that these folks have, and we're happy to discuss personnel setting, but the legal requirement is that the commission part, the NPS, which is separate from the Office of Statehood Delegation, has to be approved, and because it's
Madam Mayor,
a formality of the
if I could be recognized, please.
appropriation.
Excuse me, let me
The chair,
commend
the chair
my colleague.
excuse me, Senator, the chair recognizes Chairman Mendelson.
So I had a couple of questions. First, I guess to Senator Strauss. There are 3 FTEs?
The FTE, we actually have right now more than 3 individuals that are working in various part-time capacities
Who are being paid
who are being paid.
out of the total of out of the total of $162,000.
Yes.
One of them is an executive director for the commission,
Yes.
and then the second one is, the others are all part-time?
Is Ms. Shilgrit, who is also a full-time employee, and the others are part-time.
Okay. The effect of this amendment would be to take the $162,000 and divide it in 3?
It would be to make sure I also have an FTE. The executive director has a business card that has Senator Strauss's name on it. If you call her phone number and go to voicemail, it says Office of Senator Strauss.
Okay, that's
So
a
to
little
claim
bit, that
partiality
isn't
is-
necessarily a budget issue, but
Yeah.
what's before us is a budget. So, and you
Right.
said your motion was to divide the budget in 3, but you
Right.
then clarified that you were only speaking of the personal services.
It will be personal service and all expenses together, so the full.
All right, well then,
260
if
or
it's
so.
the entire,
The entire.
then the effect is to completely blow up the budget that we have before us. That means that we would have to see a reallocation of the 51 stars, we'd have to see a reallocation of the radio show, we'd have to see a reallocation of everything, including the car rally. As well as we would have to take the salaries that are paid and divide them by 3. I didn't quite say that right, but I don't know individual salaries, and I don't know that I want to
I wouldn't want to
discuss
blow it up.
individual salaries, but
Correct. I wouldn't want to blow it up, just working within the framework to provide those resources. So even if it's not approximately equal to 1/3, just at least having an FTE that is serviceable for all commissioners, the state commission.
Madam Chair, can I say something?
Yeah, the chair recognizes Senator Strauss.
I admire my colleague for trying to work inside the system that we've been presented with. He does a masterful job, okay? But the truth is, this isn't unity, it's confinement, okay? We're prohibited. We have no friends on the city council. The city council has unanimously voted that we do not get a salary. They've unanimously voted that we're the only elected officials in the District of Columbia not to get a salary. They're unanimously voted that we are the only elected officials in the District of Columbia that cannot qualify for matching funds, even though one of my opponents spent over $200,000 to try to get elected in our election. And we are the first people in the history of the United States, 220 years, to be taken out of the Tennessee plan. These people stand up here and say they're using the Tennessee plan, and they're not. The Tennessee plan includes 2 United States senators, which have been taken out of the Constitution that Paul and I worked to write. So this is not, the problem is not Oye, and the problem is not Paul. The problem is funding. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to make a final kind of statement, and I know that the council, and I didn't follow your presentations on the budget that I sent and the council recently voted on for 2024. But I will argue to our representative is that we really need to, if the delegation needs more staff, then we need to expand the total budget. I'm looking at the initiatives that have been outlined, and some of them have, you've had some success with and getting attention and have been part of the program. I would agree with Senator Strauss that the participation in the national conventions, and I'm glad that you're thinking about that. I have participated with you in some of those, and that is important. So I would not eliminate any of those initiatives in order to do that. I do think if there is some confusion around how staff are given work or directed to work, I hope that that's something that the delegation can figure out in your own rules amongst the delegation. But I would certainly entertain in the next budget process making sure that people are for sure being fairly compensated with benefits. But I do think it would be important to demonstrate how work is assigned. So if there are no other questions, we have the budget before us. All in favor
What was
say
the
aye.
amendment?
We have the amendment before
Amendment
us.
to,
Would you like to keep that amendment on the table?
Yes.
You would like to keep it on the table. So Representative Oyer's amendment is to, what is it again exactly?
it was to divide or at least provide this office a FTE's worth of staffing.
Okay, so the amendment before us is to divide the three assigned FTEs equally among the delegation. You have the amendment before you. All in favor say aye.
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 There are two in favor. Anyone opposed say no.
No.
The amendment fails. You have the budget before you. Any other questions, comments on the budget? Senator Strauss has already moved. It's been seconded, and I'm ready for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The budget is approved unanimously. And thank you, Senators and Representatives. And next, I want to call on Beverly Perry to provide an update from the Statehood office.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, co-chairs, Mayor Bowser, Chairman Mendelson, commissioners. For the record, I'm Beverly Perry. I'm Senior Advisor to the Mayor. My team served an executive function for this commission through the Office of Federal and Regional Affairs, led by Eugene Kinlow. And since we last met, we have a new Statehood Director, Jason Fink. So our report over the past couple of years is positive, but with a caveat. We have moved the ball down the field on statehood. We've had 2 positive votes in the House. We have fell a little short in the Senate, but in the words of our mayor, we haven't stopped. We will not stop. We'll never quit. With respect to the Senate, Senator Carper, who has been our champion, is retiring this year. So I would like to go on the record and like the Statehood Commission that thanks Senator Carper. Most importantly, we have educated people across the nation on D.C. statehood and on our plight for full democracy. We have done several things since we last met. We have used advertising to reach residents in the Greater Washington market with the mayor and the attorney general and the chairman to show how we feel about the Congress intruding in our business. We have secured placement of an op-ed by the state Democratic Party vice chair in West Virginia in the Charleston Gazette. We have had advertising at 30 universities across West Virginia and Arizona. We have which was complemented by web banners, podcasts, and digital ads. Our targeted population, we've reached over 25 million people. In 2022, we generated 1.1 million Twitter impressions and ads in Instagram. We enhanced our outreach by partnering with the League of Women Voters to record a series of PSAs and social media that were placed on social media, and also partnered with the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights. And we had a PSA by CEO Mala Wiley. Additionally, through the mayor's office, the office of the secretary, we provide $200,000 in grants to our local advocate organizations. Those grants included $100,000 to DC Vote, $35,000 to the Historic Society of Washington, D.C., $35,000 to the League of Women Voters, the Students for D.C. Statehood, $18,000, and $12,000 to the Anacostia Coordinating Council. We are excited about our accomplishments, and we look forward to, the remainder of FY23 and FY24. We know that our plight in the Senate and in the House, the Congress, the leadership now, we are not looking to get a vote this year. But, as I said, we will continue. We are not going to quit. So with that, those are the things that we've been doing over the past year. I will be taking any questions about the work on the executive team for the commission.
Thank you so much, Ms. Perry, and I'll open up the floor for questions. Senator Strauss.
One, I do want to thank you, and I want to particularly thank the members of your team, Director Kinlow. Welcome, Mr. Fink, to this side of the building or struggle. We appreciate all your effort and all your cooperations. I certainly want to echo your appreciation for Senator Carper, and if I may make a humble suggestion, that it may be appropriate to honor Senator Carper by renaming a portion of Delaware Avenue here in the District of Columbia is Senator Tom Carper Way. We have a variety of streets named for certain senators who've been helpful. Charles Percy comes to mind with a selection in Georgetown. And I think it would be, one, appropriate to thank Senator Carper, but two, to also send a message that the history of the district is watching how you treat your capital city and soon to be hopefully the 51st state. And I know that that's not something the commission itself has the authority to do, but it's one of the benefits of having the chief executive and the chairman of the legislature right here in the room with us is those suggestions can be brought immediately to their attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd also like to thank the office, especially Eugene Kinlow. Last year we did a super rally parade for DC Statehood where we brought 51 supercars out and got a lot of attention for the issue. We landed in, I think, half a dozen publications, including internationally, for our work in bringing Statehood internationally. And I know I called Eugene Kinlow, and we secured half the funding of a $5,000 rally or parade, even more than what we got from the delegation, and wasn't paid for by my political campaign. So I appreciate you being a partner in our effort and making sure that we carry forth a successful event.
I'd like to comment too I'd like to thank the senior advisor and the mayor for the work they've done and the volunteers that do so much in this effort. But I'd like to also say that, look, we're not closer to statehood than we've ever been. We just lost 44 Democrats on a bill, on that ridiculous crime bill that the mayor tried to veto and alter, which now has been altered, but cannot be sent back to the Hill. And it's time for us, this Nero approach to government while we're under attack is not appropriate. This is the beginning. They've already overturned 2 laws. When Congress meets again, one of the first thing they do will be to overturn a 3rd law, which allows people that are not documented in the District of Columbia to vote after 200 years of screaming at the top of our lungs that we deserve to be represented because we pay taxes and we fight in wars. Now in the District of Columbia, we say you don't need to do that. All you need to do is walk across the state line, and as Comey's already pointed out, that means somebody who's a citizen of China or a citizen of the Soviet Union can run for mayor in the District of Columbia. This stuff has to stop, man. We're under attack. And to sit here and talk about how much progress we've made is ridiculous. Nothing's going to happen in the next 2 years, and I'm sorry to tell you that, but our approach is to go up to Capitol Hill and say to people that don't care that we pay taxes and fight in wars, all they care about is 2 more Democrats in the United States Senate. They do not want 2 liberal Democrats, probably black Democrats, from the District of Columbia to sit in the United States Senate. And it doesn't matter what we say, if we're not willing to fight for this, it's never going to happen, okay? So to sit here and talk about the progress we're making is not appropriate. I'm sorry, it's a budget hearing, I know that. But since we're on the budget, let me tell you that I came up with this idea with a guy named Frank Suarez in the lottery office, and my little idea has already raised $1.5 million for the District of Columbia. Now, that makes us the only elected officials in the District of Columbia that earn their own keep. If you take all the money that's been given to our delegation since the day our delegation was formed, it does not come up to $1.5 million. So we're paying our own way, we're doing the work in the field, and we're not getting supported. And this is ridiculous. This man deserves a full-time staffer. He has the title of United States Congressman. The same people that voted for the mayor and voted for the chairman, voted for me, voted for Paul, and voted for him. If their power comes from votes they get from the people, so should ours. Thank you. I'm so good.
That concludes my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that doesn't diminish the work that's being done. There is work being done.
Okay, so I want to open up for any further discussions or presentations and public comment. I'll start with the commission.
I would like to give a brief synopsis or report of what I did in the last couple of years. The honor of my lifetime was being the U.S. Representative of Washington, D.C., and I pride myself on not only doing a good job, but providing the same thing that anybody else would get in their states, regardless of the limitations. So the mission statement of being the U.S. representative is amplify the fight for D.C. statehood, whether it's in D.C., whether it's outside of D.C., whether it's outside this country, and we've done our best to do so. In terms of statehood activity, which is my paramount duty, we did a landmark action by going to West Virginia and having the very first D.C. statehood resolution introduced in the House of Delegates in West Virginia. I was joined by my brother over there, Julian Goldstein, and we put D.C. on the map. We knocked on doors. We talked about bills that 2 more electors in the Senate and 1 voting representative would be able to support to not only impact D.C. lives positively, but also West Virginia. We did our D.C. statehood for car parade for D.C. statehood because there's people who, quite frankly, don't show up in these rooms. We need to get the attention of everybody, whether they're young, whether they're old, whether they live in D.C., whether they're not, because each and every voice is important for us. But statehood impacts more than just a voting representative. It impacts healthcare, public safety, it impacts the money that's made here, it impacts our autonomy. And as representative, I contributed to the betterment of that. Being elected during the pandemic put me as a pharmacist on ground zero. We not only vaccinated over 10,000 people in the district, we also led to the Greenbelt Metro Station, allowing DC residents to get vaccinated there. Politicians couldn't do it. I talked as a pharmacist and as a healthcare provider to make sure DC residents who can go to Greenbelt goes there, and the folks who couldn't can get vaccinated in their neighborhoods. We save lives. Public safety is something that matters a lot to me. I know a kid that when he was 13 years old was written off, came from a good family, was told that he'd be dead by 18, hopefully in jail by 21. He was getting into fights regularly, and his parents didn't know what to do with him. The reason why I know this kid is because that kid was me. I was getting into fights because I was getting bullied. I was getting picked on for the way I looked, picked on for my name, picked on for how I sounded. And I was able to find a mentor to turn my life around, but there were a lot of people like me who didn't get out of crime early enough. So I focused on public safety. So we have expungement clinics where we're helping returning citizens clear their records, get jobs, turn their lives around, talk about legislation that affects statehood, but also keeps DC residents safer. Because when employment goes up, crime goes down. Next thing we've done is develop our young people. Outside of volunteering in classrooms, getting kids interested in science, or teaming up with the FBI to get kids interested in upper careers, we're trying to create a pipeline of young people getting into jobs that would not only have them working in DC, but keep them in DC 10, 15, 20 years from now when we do become a state. So we have a program where we're trying to get students into Congress where they will work as LDs or LAs or chief of staffs, but carry the statehood with them to their office. Without a stipend or any type of way of paying them, they don't stay long enough to be developed into those future careers. Environmental justice, we are partnering with Congresswoman Norton to find ways to have more control over our MPS services, whether our federal parklands, whether it's cleaning them up, planting trees, or even planting bike stands at certain federal parks. We're part of Card Bearing Alliance with Rock Creek Parks to really find our ways to amplify what we do in this community. Next is about human rights. DC is the fairest city in this country. We are pro-LGBTQ+, we allow second chances, we employ returning citizens faster and better than other areas. But we can't just rest on who we are. I go to other states, talk to them about what DC is, and if it's good enough for us, it's good enough for them. And they don't have to come to DC to get LGBTQ+ services or get abortions. We should be able to vote on legislation to make it fair over there as well. So I've gone to Delaware to speak on LGBTQ+ issues. I talked about West Virginia's trip where we introduced the DC State Resolution. I've been to California talking about the Crown Act, things that we care about here in the DC, and not only caring about them, but also make sure they care about us in return. Last but not least, we're trying to support businesses, black and brown and women businesses. We supported Peter Bugg because we want to make sure that he survives when we become a state. We support Wanda on 7th because we want to make sure that she's still on 7th Street when we become a state. And my goal is, once they see me supporting them, they'll also start supporting DC State bigger. Whether it's putting a sign in their store so Howard students come down, or when it's Peter Bugg Day, people from outside the district come back and see that we care about these things. But none of that happens when we don't show care and compassion for the things that they care about, like staying up, being a historical preserved area, making sure that they have access to grants and contracts that will keep them where they're at and employ people from the community. We mentioned earlier about the budget request. At the end of the day, I didn't have a budget last year. I refinanced my house. I went from a pharmacy manager to a staff pharmacist to make my time up, and I poured tens of thousands of dollars into the work I've done. I'm proud of the relationships and the work that we've done, but it's not sustainable if I don't have anyone to help out. Now, I'm not blaming anybody for a budget I signed off last year or a vote we had just now, but I'm very proud of the work we've done, and we're just scratching the surface. If we're able to pay a couple of students to let them stay on so they can get trained for a better job, if we're able to do more community outreach so more black women-owned businesses can learn about what we're doing, then I can have a bigger impact. This is not about running for another position. I'm not interested in that. I just want to do the best job that I can do And I'm tired of seeing opportunities go by because I don't have enough help. But with that said, I'm not disconcerted. I'm not upset. I just want to make sure that DC residents at the end of the day get the most that they get out of this office. I'm very proud of this office. I'm happy to be in this office. I'm happy to share the stage with the people on the stage because I learned so much from you, Chairman Mendelson. I learned so much from you, Mayor Bowser. I learned so much from you, Senator Strauss and Senator Brown, because without you all, I can't do what I do. And without you all, I wouldn't be here today. And I thank you all in the audience for allowing me to be your representative.
Thank you, Representative, for that update.
I just have one thing to add, and, you know, my mandate says that I'm supposed to inform Congress of our readiness for statehood and inform the council and the mayor on our progress and what's going on. So I just want to say that there's a lovely gentleman from Georgia named Andrew Clyde, who's a Republican and has a colleague in Illinois who wants to, has publicly said, along with that lovely lady from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that we should get rid of the mayor's office and we should get rid of the council. So this is a serious fight, folks. It's not, you know, we're going to have a couple of rallies and we need to fight. Frederick Douglass told us that. Martin Luther King told us that. And we're not going to get there by talking about it. We're only going to get there by doing it. Thank you.
Yes, comments? Any other comments from the public? Okay, so with that, I want to thank all of the commission members for your presence today. I want to acknowledge some of the somber comments that we heard. I want to acknowledge the activity report and that we offered as well, and acknowledge the budget, and that there is some that the budget issue is not settled, and I would continue to advise the delegation to engage the process early. Our process has already begun for next year, as well as the councils, and anything else that comes up in the meanwhile, we can certainly entertain. I do want to be clear, though, because I heard a lot of kind of celebrating what the problem is. We know what the problem is, and we know how serious the problem is. But we also need to make sure that we're taking steps every day to change it. We alone won't be able to change the makeup of the House of Representatives, but it will change. It will. We
Doesn't matter, Mayor.
we won't be able to save the Senate, but I believe we'll save it. We alone won't be able to fight to make sure we have reasonable people in the White House that support our issues. But what is in our grasp is to be ready when the political winds are blowing our way. And so I do very much take exception to the comment that was made, is that we haven't made progress, because we have. Even when I started in 2015, we didn't even have the entire delegation, including the Democrats, that supported DC statehood.
We still don't.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't. In the
only
Senate,
one
we have 3 Democrats that do not support us.
I'm talking about this region, sir. In 2015, we did not have every Democrat in the DMV supporting statehood. We do now. The only one that's the outliers, and is he still in office? Andy Harris. He's a Republican. All the Democrats support us, including Steny Hoyer, who was not a proponent of DC statehood. And so we have to acknowledge that progress. We have to.
Well, I'm not saying there's not progress,
Well,
Mayor.
that is actually what you
But statehood is
said.
like pregnancy. It either is or it isn't. You're not halfway there. If you get the ball down to the 10-yard line, it doesn't make a damn difference. It either happens or it doesn't happen.
Let me continue.
And you don't have 60 people
Let
in the
me
Senate, and you won't in our lifetime.
Let me continue. What my commitment is to not to do things the same way, and to be ready when we have people supporting us. Okay. You know, in 2015, we never had a Democratic nominee or a Democratic president who would support us. We didn't have that. Hillary Clinton was the first one. And now we have a president in the White House who supports statehood for D.C.
That's not true, Mayor. Bill Clinton testified before the United States Congress in support of D.C. statehood. Hillary Clinton was not the first.
Okay,
And
I stand
look,
corrected.
I don't want to argue with you
I'm
in
not going to
public.
argue with you because
well,
I have
appreciate-
allowed you to speak.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm chairing the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.